Hello, 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 and welcome, welcome, welcome everyone to the 14th edition of the Leaders Cafe by Transform Me. Um, Super excited to be hosting this for the 14th time. And last time we had Roshan Abbas with us, and today I'm super excited about the guest, the leader that we have, specifically because it's an organization that has gone from the realities and the challenges of startup to becoming a huge success. And I'm really curious to hear more about what that journey has been like, especially since our Leaders Cafe today is about high performing teams for startup success. But even before I move forward, for many of you are part of the Transform Me tribe, Transform Me community. You know about us, but I know some of us may be joining the community now or becoming part of the Leaders Cafe now. So, just a quick background: we set up Transform Me 11 years back with a very clear mission and a very clear purpose of enabling transformation for leaders, especially in a way that transforms the organization. Our goal was always to enable leaders in a way that transforms the organization. And that's the mission that we've been on for the last 11 years. It's been an exciting roller coaster of a ride. And we've been blessed to partner with some of the best names in the industry, and we learn from them every time. Um, the four areas that we focus on, and which is where this conversation comes in, these are the four areas we focus on, and we help our clients with: number one, leadership development; number two, diversity and inclusion solutions; number three, work around out of storytelling, which is what the previous Leaders Cafe was all about with Roshan; and number four, which is what this Leaders Cafe is really going to drive a conversation around, um, top team alignment, specifically in the context of startups, building high performance teams. And we run something called Synergizing Strengths. And like I said, really curious to hear from our speaker today on what their journey has been like. Um, we started the Leaders Cafe, and there's Gaurav. Welcome, 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 Gaurav.
Hi.
So good to have you with us. And I'm super excited and curious about what you're going to be sharing. I've got my notebook ready to take down my notes, my learning nuggets, Gaurav. And just for our audience to also know, before I talk to you about Gaurav and introduce him, we started the Leaders Cafe. Um, we were sitting one day as a team and we were talking about, there's so many things that need to get discussed and need to go out there, but we're not doing enough. And we wanted to create a platform where we could have conversations that matter by people that matter. And Gaurav, you're certainly one of those people that matter today. And therefore, really, really excited to have you here with us. Uh, we have, this is an organization from Healthcart to 1MG to Tata 1MG being acquired by Tata a few years back. We're talking about the number one healthcare services company, Tata 1MG. I understand, Gaurav, you have more than 5 million organic app downloads. And I think I saw some data there that 25 million monthly page views. Really exciting. And at the helm of making this journey successful is Gaurav Agarwal. Really excited to welcome and introduce Gaurav. I hope I'm able to do justice to your introduction, Gaurav. From what I read and from what I know, Gaurav is a computer science graduate from IIT Delhi, and then after that spent over a decade in the Silicon Valley before he co-founded 1MG with two other partners, two other co-founders. And I noticed one interesting thing, Gaurav. You were with Zynga. I saw on your LinkedIn profile, and I noticed you had mentioned leading Farmville. And I'm assuming it was the same Farmville that became my first ever video game addiction many years back.
Oh, wow.
But yeah. But
Yes, right.
really excited to have you here with us, Gaurav, to have a conversation around how to develop high performing teams for startups, because you've been through that journey. You've led that journey of the startup reality of HealthCart 1MG to it becoming a success story. So, welcome, Gaurav. Really good to have you here.
Hey, Gatak, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be doing this. Just wanted to add a couple of corrections. 1MG has probably, we've even stopped tracking it now, 35 million active, 35 million lifetime app downloads. And
Oh, wow.
when it comes to again numbers, then we are a top 10 healthcare website in the world. Our page views are probably in billions. Our monthly active user are 35 million plus. So, if you go to any website like SimilarWeb, etc., you'll see that 1MG is right up there with the likes of cdc.gov and the largest in India, of course, and a top 10 in the world. So yeah, I just want to get that out that uh, we used to talk about 25 million page view numbers back in 2015. We are talking billions now, and
Wow.
just want to get that
Wow. Wow.
out.
That's a huge difference. Thanks for the correction. That is a huge difference. Billions of page views. That is a completely different context. Thanks for correcting me there, Gaurav. And really want to start off by maybe picking your brains, and this is going to be a freewheeling conversation, but really
Yeah.
would love to get a sense of how's the journey been like, specifically about around building an effective team from the ground up over these last 6 7 8 years. How's that been like? Let's start with that.
Yeah, look, I think it's tough to summarize, but if I was to at all summarize, I think there are a few words that stand out. One, it's of course been extremely gratifying to try and build out. And when we started to build 1MG, I think people do startups for many different reasons. But for me, one of the core reasons to do a startup like 1MG was to try and build a team which was a reflection of, let's say, my leadership values or our leadership values collectively. And the fact that we've been able to build a company that is really successful, I would say, and actually also very well branded in the ecosystem as a company that tries to do the right thing every single time. We don't always succeed, but at least we try. And then if we make a mistake, we go back and try and fix those mistakes as well. I think a lot of this has been a reflection of our leadership style and our leadership values as well. So one is the journey has been extremely gratifying. I think the second is that the journey um, has been extremely challenging with so many roadblocks and setbacks along the way. And one is that you develop resilience to figure out how do if you don't succeed the first time or the second time or the third time, how do you keep going because of a really strong belief that you have in something, that you have to see it through. And the journey, I would say, has just been challenging and gratifying at the same time. And of course, extremely I would say full of learnings as well. When I look back to the time of, let's say, 2015, 16, etc., I think we are very naive also when it came to how things worked or how to make certain things stand out, and how we did, or we exercised leadership. We had all these notions about, let's say, radical candor or servant leader, but I don't really I don't really think I knew or we knew as a team how those manifested themselves and uh, what, let's say, their effects were. But I think we are a lot more. Over the years, we've learned a lot, and we've become practitioners of a lot of these concepts. And it's a constant struggle to figure out how do we build better quality organizations. So again, reiterating, I think gratifying, challenging, lots of lessons and learnings for us as well, and maybe even discovery of our own leadership style over the years.
Yeah, and I loved what you said. Part of it was also, like you said, Gaurav, the part of the discovery process of what do we stand for, and is it radical candor, is it something else? And interestingly, I was watching this movie Air on Nike
Yeah,
Air, and how they signed up Michael Jordan just recently. And obviously, I've read the book Shoe Dog as well, and it talks about those principles that they have, that we're constantly on the offensive, and those kind of guiding principles become so important in for a startup leadership team. And I noticed some of the ones that you have at 1MG, and some of them really stood out for me as I was reading. Specifically, one said, "Be your own CEO." Right.
yeah,
And
yeah.
of course, you have team before individual and accountability with empathy. uh, but yeah, talk to me more about how this be your own CEO kind of a culture in a leadership team for a startup came about, and how do you live it? Any challenges you faced around it? Because a lot of our viewers who are here today, Gaurav, are likely here to understand what are some of the mistakes that they can learn from that you've perhaps made that they don't need to make in their organizations, right? So, talk to us a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
No, absolutely. And I'll also be very, very honest and candid in admitting that these are not values that we invented. A lot of these are values that come from past organizations that we worked for and that really resonated with us. So, for instance, to give you an example, and I'll also talk about when we created these values. So, 1MG was founded in 2015, and this is, I think, circa 2016, where we're doing our first leadership offsite. And the organization at that time, we felt it was scaling really fast. Of course, the organization that we had then is nothing compared to what we have today in the complexity and the
Right.
size. Uh, but we felt that it's really important for us to get some values in place before we grew really fast, because we are all, when it comes to our leadership styles, we are all but Prashant and I and Tanmay, who's a third pillar for our executive team, if you will. We all worked for many, many years in the Bay Area. Prashant's, for instance, worked with Unilever, McKinsey, and then startups. Tanmay worked for Disney, and again Unilever. And then I had experience with NetApp, which was for many years, a top five great place to work, probably still is. And then Zynga. And what we found was, each of these organizations helped us discover our own leadership styles and also showed us what made teams, let's say, work or not work, tick, for lack of a different word. So be your own CEO. When we were putting these values together, be your own CEO is a value that I resonated with and something that I learned at Zynga. And Farmville was just a magical. Zynga was just a magical place, right? There was so much emphasis put on initiative and the fact that a single individual who wanted to accomplish something could actually take down all roadblocks and get something done. And what I got to see at Zynga and Farmville, because I was leading Farmville as a team, was that even if a line level engineer decided that something needed to be done, uh, somehow magically things came together. And what the be your own CEO quality does is that a lot of us have ideas, right? That this is wrong, this should be done differently, but very few of us actually take that ownership to drive change. It's something that I talk to my team still very, very frequently, that great organizations are organizations that drive ownership, accountability, responsibility at a grassroots level, right? They don't wait for, let's say, uh, executive or the CEO to say, now this is how we are going to behave, this is how we are going to act, right? And we've always strived to create this organization that had a very strong uh, base level compass of what's the right thing to do, what's the right thing to do for the customers, what's the right thing to do for the business, what's the right thing to do, that's from an expense standpoint, right? And so this be your own CEO was this one quality that uh, the three of us felt it was just so close to our heart, where we wanted individuals to just say, this is the right thing, this is what needs to happen, and I will make it happen, right? The last part is really important, that I will make it happen, right? It's not
Yeah.
dependent on me getting executive sponsorship, etc. I will figure out. And what we've seen is that over the years, our best leaders are people, our folks, individuals who've basically shown this really high level of initiative and ownership and driven things through, not who've not shied away from making tough decisions, even if they are wrong decisions. Now, over years, putting be your own CEO as a quality was one thing, but then realizing what you need to do to actually enable someone who wanted to be a CEO was a completely different ballgame, because you cannot expect individuals to, let's say, practice being your own CEO if you punish failure, for instance, right? Or
Yeah.
if you didn't give them autonomy and decision making rights, or if you said, hey, I will put so many encumbrances on you when it comes to, let's say, approving or unapproving things, that you will not be able to make even a single line of progress without getting some executive level buy-in. And while it has, as the company has matured, it's definitely gotten more complex. But even today, for a company of our size, the number of things that an individual can do, the number of decisions that people can make, where they are not encumbered by any sort of core executive team for decision making, is just outstanding and mind blowing, right? And this is something why a lot of incoming leaders at 1MG also struggle, because they're used to so much structure and support in decision making, that being your CEO actually becomes a lot harder, is a lot harder than what it appears, right? Because we will not make decisions for you. We will say right or wrong, you make a decision, then we support you 100% of the way. And it requires so much self conviction, so much humility also, because when things don't work, what we are looking for is not that. And I use this phrase with my team, and they started to make fun of me, where I say, hey, when you go spend company money, either come back with results or come back with learnings. Don't come back empty-handed, right? It's okay for you to fail. In that, and we use it across the board. And in that one phrase, we say, it's okay to fail as long as you learn. And that's a really core part of our team.
Yeah.
The second, just one more, I know, leadership quality that I want to talk about was the team before individual is a really important thing for us, because, and again, this originated from all the previous companies that we worked for, that, oftentimes we have this, one star, right? Who does everything by himself, who somehow becomes a star. And the star gets recognized. And we said that, while we want stars, we actually want stars who actually take people together, who take the organizational capability and bring things together, rather than, I'm this lone wolf and I hunt alone and I will get all the results alone. And we wanted to somehow enshrine in 1MG that we value the team more than the individual. And we don't want, it's okay for us to not have individual rock stars, even though we have so many of them. But it's really important for every person to actually be part of a team and feel like a part of a team, right? And again, some of the ways in which we've, let's say, ensured this value stands out is by, for instance, rewarding teams more than rewarding individuals, right? So we do reward individuals. Someone stood out, but then we have rewards for teams as well. Team of the quarter, team that did outstanding work, team that, let's say, accomplished a certain goal, right? And we want to say that, hey, how do we remove the influence of an individual, because that anyways gets identified in many, many different ways. But how do we actually recognize a team and recognize the work that that team did together, right? And
Sure.
so it's complex, but this is how the values came about. And every year that we've grown, we've reassessed. I think our values are really strong. But one of the things that we are now starting to think of is that, do we need more sub values, right?
Yeah.
Do we need more, like, these are core values, four of them, and do we need more that, let's say, drive a different set of behavior, right? So for instance, I'll give you an example. In the product team, which is the technology and product team, in the product manager team, one sort of quote I created 3 years ago was quality of ideas and quality of execution, right? And what I said was that, because poor ideation, and when we were a small startup, a lot of our success depended on how quickly we could experiment and execute ideas, right?
Yeah, I
And
saw
that
that.
is
I saw something called done is better than perfect or something like that
that is
as well. Isn't that one of your values
It
as
is
well?
one of
Yeah.
our values, right? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we've always been so strong that if we were really convinced about doing something, like, we could turn it around on a dime. And I was speaking with some of my team members the other day, and they were like, "Oh, I remember this one time we sat all night and we got something done." And this is like 4 years back, and those memories are still fresh. And they were like, "I remember you came in and you said nobody's gonna go home. We are gonna get it done tonight." And we were all
Right.
there, and we ordered parathas and Coke and Red Bull, and we got it done, right? And And it worked then. And as we've grown bigger as an organization, it can also work the other way, because you may be
Mm,
chasing too many marginal opportunities, which may not make sense, because when you become a bigger organization, you need to eat commensurate meals or go after commensurate
sure.
opportunities, right? So what I was noticing was uh, that that we were picking too many small problems, things that maybe did not have uh, a step function change in our trajectory. They had
Sure.
function change when we were small, 10, 20, 40% team, but not today when we were 200, 250% team, for instance, and I'm talking about 3, 4 years back. And
Mm,
so for the product team, I created this thing that, hey, quality of ideas, quality of execution, which means that before an idea goes into execution, we need to be sure that there's at least some quality bar associated. Doesn't mean that, uh, and again, uh, most organizations confuse where uh, quality of ideas, quality of execution may mean some approval. We don't do any approvals whatsoever, right? It's
mm,
basically just a series of questions that you have to answer for yourself. Nobody even looks at it. Where you are saying that, hey, my idea has so much value, and then amongst all the ideas that I have, this is the most important value that the highest value that I can
right.
get. And when you execute, the only question that you have to answer is that, did you get the value that you anticipated or not,
That's it.
right?
That's it. And on that one, Gaurav, since you've touched on, and I've been sitting with this question for a while because this is very close to my heart as well. Because what you've spoken about so far is really one. What's really worked for your organization, Tata One MG, is a high level of ownership and accountability. That's the first bit that I'm hearing you talk about. The second bit that I heard you talk a lot about is the team before the individual, right? And not
Yeah.
just looking at rock stars and superstars, but really driving a team. Now, and I'm sure the viewers are also curious about how did you get there as an organization, the level of ownership, the level of accountability, the level of team, given the challenges and the realities that a startup goes through. For example, we work with a lot of startup organizations and helping their top leadership team get aligned, and we've worked with over 100 of them doing something that we call synergizing strengths, and where we understand and we kind of work with the group through a lab process. Very exciting work. But one of some of the things that we often hear, and I'm curious whether that's been the same thing for you, as a problem statement of startup organizations wanting to build a high performance team. Number one is most startup organizations tend to hire the best talent, best leadership talent from different pools, right? So you could be getting the most pedigree, the best organization leaders who've been rock stars. Individual rock stars are often hired, right? Number one. Number two, uh, that often leads to a level of diverse leadership pool, right? So you're getting somebody from academia, you're getting somebody who's a subject matter expert, you're getting a technology expert, you're getting a business side expert, so on and so forth. So you've got an interesting dynamic happening there where you've got all individual rock stars who've come together to become part of a new team. Number one. Number two, the diversity is high. Number three, the pace of execution and getting things done in a startup, like you said, pulling an all-nighter, having Red Bulls, it's very different from where these people may have come from. And obviously the need for leaders to establish their own credibility fairly quickly, right? And when you add all of these together, ownership, accountability, team before individual often tend to be challenges where organizations are often struggling with situations like what we call artificial harmony, where there is issues of trust, but people at a superficial level, everything seems fine. But if you go deeper, there are issues, right? There is avoidance of conflict. There is low accountability and so on and so forth, right? Turf issues and things like that. And we've seen that happen a lot with a lot of startup organizations, which I wouldn't call it a problem as much as a reality or a part of the process of how a high performing team kind of goes through the process. Um, I'm curious to understand, and if you can share some incidents, I'm sure our viewers would love that as well. Incidents, I'm sure our viewers would love that as well. Incidents where organizations have failed to deliver on their promises. I'm curious to understand Hi,
Hey,
Gaurav.
hey, Karthik, hi. I think there was some, you know,
There was a bit of a blip there. Can you hear me now?
yeah, I can hear you now just fine. So I heard
Sorry about
the leadership sort of art of, the challenges of leadership. I didn't get the last part, which is share incidents, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was curious to find out is, A, did you as an organization go through a similar reality that I articulated, diverse set of leaders, individual rock stars, turf issues, and artificial harmony or whatever? Did you go through that? Number one. And number two, if you did, how did you overcome that? And any, maybe two or three tips, very specifically, if you could share with the group of how to overcome something like that would be really helpful, Gaurav.
Look, again, it's a reality of life. You put a few strong-headed, well-accomplished individuals in a place, and you will get a lot of conflict. I think and I'll be honest with you. I'd be, I'd be anyone who says that they've managed to solve this problem is probably not being genuine enough, because anytime you bring in a senior leader on a team, and senior leader may vary based on the organization, maturity, size, age, level, etc. You are going to face challenges because people come with a certain personality type and a certain fundamental value system, and you're bringing them into a new value system, right? And typically when you bring in leaders, there are, and look, interviews, we all know interviews are uh, the best mechanism we have to evaluate candidates, but they are not foolproof, right?
Yeah, it's
And
rarely accurate. I know what you mean.
it's rarely accurate, right? You speak with an individual. So, and we have made so many of these mistakes that, like, I can't even begin. So the first the first lesson that we learned, because we tried to hire a lot of senior leaders, we brought them in, and they didn't work out, right, for a variety of different reasons. We got someone who was an expert in, let's say, supply chain, came in, didn't really. The first lesson that we learned was that when you get in a senior leader, and this is really challenging, when you get in a senior leader, today, if you take a leader from 1mg, you don't know if the leader has succeeded because of the 1mg ecosystem, because we are a large company, we've put in a lot of structures in place, we've learned a lot of lessons, which actually removes some amount of mistake. It removes some amount of core, like 0 to 1 journey. You come in, a
Yeah.
lot of stuff is set
Yeah.
up, and you have to just fit in a steering wheel, etc. You don't have to go rummage around in the warehouse or the junkyard and basically find parts of a car, right? And the first lesson that we learned was that when you interview a senior leader, can you establish what this leader has done and accomplished by himself, rather than what the organization has enabled the leader to do? And
Yeah.
this is a really tough thing to do, but we found that most of the time, especially early on and even today, when when a leader struggles to come and succeed at 1mg, the core reason is that a lot of the enablement came from the organization rather than from them actually having the ability to figure out how to work, how to change the organization. So
Yeah.
that was one. I think the second sort of big mistake and big lesson that we've learned again is that we are all, again, leaders have strong personality, strong desire to show output, etc. But we have almost never seen a leader succeed who comes in and tries to make an impact from day zero, because they fail to realize that they're working in a foreign organism, where they are constantly being evaluated and judged, and and they don't understand how every organization, right, no matter who you are, how, like, good of an organization you are, there's always undercurrents, right? There are ways to
Yeah.
do things, etc. And if you're coming in and starting to knock too many things like a bull in a china shop, then you have to learn what's the right way of doing things, right? So that is something else that we learned, right? There are leaders who've done phenomenally well, who came in and said, hey, I don't know anything, and they were humble enough to just go in and say, hey, I will help you, right? How can I help you? Tell me, I will do some work, I will bring my team, etc. And they took this approach of helping with their peers, with their team itself. They said, look, you know the business better than I do, how can I help you, right? And they basically went and pitched in and started to understand and win that trust, and said, this is where I feel you guys are missing, so let me put this together for you, right? And we've seen that, for instance, with leaders we brought into various business functions, where a leader, and that's something that we've also modulated now, where I'll give you an example, right? Specific example. We got in a senior leader. Uh, the brief that we gave that senior leader was that, hey, our technology releases aren't happening on time and with high quality, can you go fix it, right? And what did this senior leader do? He basically went and started to beat a bunch of people on their heads, saying, hey, I'm going to put a process in place and you're going to fix this release. And what happened as a result was that people felt that they were not trusted. They also felt that this leader didn't know what the real challenges were, and they basically, because he was senior and they had no choice but to accept what he was saying, they accepted it, but with a lot of misgivings. And as a result, everything slowed down, nothing was happening, right? And eventually, a year later, we said, hey, dude, sorry, but it's not working out, right? And
Yeah.
that's also a mistake that we made, right? Where the most important thing is, what I've learned is that you hire a leader and you put them in a place where where if a leader succeeds or fails, you can figure out why exactly that happened. A lot of times when you
Mm,
put leaders in a complex, broken situation and it doesn't work out, we are unable to figure out that if the situation was broken or if the leader failed to make an impact, right? So
sure.
that was the second big learning. The third big learning, at least for me, has been that uh, who the leader works with in the first 3 to 4 months is almost as critical for the leader's success as what they work on. Because,
That's such a great point. Yeah.
right? And we often feel that, even for instance, our value of be your own CEO works against us, because we want a leader to come in, we want him to sink or swim. But 1MG is no longer like a baby splash pool, right? It's this raging Amazon river with like crocodiles who are coming out to sort of bite a chunk off your leg all the time, right? So working with someone who can help you understand how to navigate situations in large companies is really important. Or for instance, I'll give you another example. I was talking to these really bright people who have an early stage startup, right? And they said,
Mm.
"Oh, nobody is working out." And I said, "Why?" Because they said, "We don't trust anyone," right?
Ah,
And they were like, "We don't trust anyone because we don't know if they're making the right decisions. What if they make poor decisions? What if they fail?" And I feel that a large part of why we've had some really amazing rock stars at 1MG, a lot of why people have worked is also because of our quality set, right? You will not find
mm,
us in your path day to day. We are there, observing everything, noticing everything, and actually setting the right boundaries, right? So a lot of how we do stuff is we say, these are the metrics for success, uh, both business wise and also how we want to be doing things from a philosophy wise. If you veer off the
mm.
track, we give you feedback and get you back on the track. But other than that, we don't really get in your way, right? And that's really really important.
Yeah, and I love this last bit that you said, Gaurav. Again, resonates so much with the work that we do, because very often when we're working with leadership teams of startups, the founder, the CEO, and all the leaders, the conversation around trust almost always happens, right? And
Yep.
we
Yep.
all have a notion around trust. Actually, before I go there, my team just reminded me, for our viewers there, if you have questions to ask of us, please keep them coming in the comment section. We will take them up in a bit towards the end of the conversation. So please don't hold on to your questions. Please put them in. Coming back to what I was saying, Gaurav, the conversation around trust almost always happens, right? And I've noticed this very interesting trend. I've noticed that, um, especially in tech organizations, right, tech startups, we have all accepted the idea of experimentation with product, right? We have all accepted the idea of being agile in our workflow. We have all accepted failing fast in ideas. But all these three, when it comes to relationships, we've not accepted. So we're holding on to the same old ways of building relationships, which does not work in this new world. Because if you are an organization moving so fast, I often hear leaders say that when I say, why is trust an issue for you? They say, we're a new team. I'm like, how long are you? Have you been together? They say 6 months. ऐसे 6 months तो लाइफ टाइम है यार एक स्टार्टअप की लाइफ में 6 महीने में कितना कुछ हो गया आपकी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में एंड they, we're still holding on to the thing that building trust takes time and the I think the mindset we have to shift perhaps is the fact that we need to start learning how to build trust quickly. And maybe one of the ways to do that is like fail fast, which is, there are two ways in which you can build trust in a team. One is, I tell you, Gaurav, I will trust you when you earn my trust, right? That's the old way of looking at trust. Well, what time lagta hai? The other way of building trust is saying, Gaurav, I don't know you from Adam, but I trust you from day one till you break my trust. So let's start with that approach. But that seems to be a fair bit of a challenge but
No,
we've
that's
seen
a
some organizations doing a pretty good job there. But what's your view on that?
No, that's a great point. And actually, I'll give you my own example. So this is back in the Zynga days, right? Bay Area. I had this really amazing game producer I used to work with. His name was Blake McLaren. So Blake comes to me. We are at a vending machine trying to get Coke, and he's like, "Hey Gaurav, I had just joined Zynga like 2 3 months, 4 months back, and I was already
Right.
like." Uh, I was like a bull in a china shop. I was breaking things here and there. I was also, uh, and Zynga used to work at a very very different pace. Like 3 months at Zynga was like, maybe a year at another company. So I'd already in a month I had already figured out how to help people, etc. 2 months later, I was starting to break some things around. And so he said, "Hey, do you give people your trust, or do they have to earn your trust, right?" And I was very cocky. I gave a very cocky response. Of course, dude, you have to earn my trust, right? Because otherwise, you just get whatever XYZ from me, right? And I don't. I think that maybe a reflection of my maturity today is that today I give people my trust, right? And that whole change has happened over the last 7 to 8 years, because I also feel that when we bring someone into our team, there's an obligation, there's a responsibility to trust. And
Of course.
what's made me also realize at 1MG over the years is that there's no one right way of doing things.
Mm,
What becomes the right way is a lot of organizational context, etc. And if you marry yourself to this idea that my way or the highway, this is the right way, then you're basically also saying that the organization does not evolve and does not maybe discover new ways of doing things, right? So
mm,
the way I have internalized this today is that when we bring people in, anyone in, then I say that, hey, 1MG has a robust interview process. This person has come through that process. And as a result, I'm going to assume that they are accomplished, qualified, capable of doing this job. Here's the job they have.
absolutely.
And what I've changed is that I've said, hey, here's my success metrics for you, both in terms of, let's say, and when I say I don't tell people that this is, or we don't tell people that this is how we expect you to do your job, but as long as you're doing things which keep the 1MG values in line behaviorally, and then you keep business metrics, we don't really step in unless you're way out of line somewhere, right? And then
Yeah.
it makes the conversations much better because the feedback to that individual also is in line with what we really care about, rather than how you do things, right? And if you want to change processes, if you want to change software, if you want to change people, all of that is essentially your decision criteria, right? So I would say
Yeah.
that's a beautiful point. It takes a lot. There are some people who are born with this maturity, and uh, their personalities lend themselves to give trust. Like my wife is one of them. But for me, it took me a lot of learning to realize ki, oh no, this is, there's a better way of doing this, and it's still a learning process for me, right?
Yeah, and you're right. You're right. I think it changes from individuals to individuals, and you're right. It's not easy to do, but I think the approach that's worked for us when we are coaching these leadership teams, Gaurav, is to help them understand that it's nothing. I mean, trusting people is nothing other than risk taking. And if
Yeah.
you consider yourself a leader who's good at risk taking on business decisions and things like that, this is another avenue that you can expand that strength of yours to. And I think some level of that awareness and that challenge comes in when you see it from an external lens, right? And that's perhaps one
Yeah.
of the things that I also wanted to check in with you, Gaurav, because we've often noticed that leadership teams that are going through some of these challenges of startup and trying to build a high performing team, diverse people, high growth, trust issues, artificial harmony, a little bit of uncertainty, all of that happening. um, we've noticed that sometimes leaders can be too close to the forest, too close to, what do they say, too close to the trees to be able to see the forest, right? And they sometimes need an external view, an external nudge and push, and that's where really we come in from a coaching standpoint and from a learning standpoint. What role do you see of leadership teams or in a startup ecosystem to develop a high performance team? What role do you see training and coaching playing there, whether external, whether internal, doesn't matter, but what role do you see coaching, training playing in helping a startup team becoming a high performing team?
And again, I'm not saying this because you are speaking with me, but I think it's absolutely critical. And
Yeah.
I was exposed to coaching, again during Zynga, because I was a senior leader on the team, and they gave me a personal coach, right? And I feel that from then on, I've had coaches in one way or another, and I think that's probably the most important thing that any startup CEO can do is identify uh, who their coach could be, right? And
Yeah.
this coach is someone um, who can listen to them, who can empathize with them, but who can also give them tools and tricks and techniques to actually deal with some of these decision making criteria, strategies, etc. And oftentimes people feel, when I talk to them, when I tell them that, hey, you should get a coach, uh, it almost feels like it almost feels you're broken in some way, right? That you cannot solve these problems because we're all, uh, let's say, we all like to think we are accomplished, smart, we can figure things out on our own, right? And so the moment you say, hey, you should get someone who can help you, um, people almost are taken aback that, oh my god, like don't you think I can do this on my own? But I feel that oftentimes, and it's been true for me for sure, a third party perspective on teasing apart problems, helping you understand what you may be struggling with, and then giving you, because coaches, if you get, let's say, a coach, that person's usually working with many, many different people, hopefully some who have gone through similar situations, and the core is for you to get access to a toolkit, right? No different from having, let's say, a math teacher or a physics teacher, right? And I feel the mistake most people make is that they talk to mentors who they may speak with maybe once a year, once every 6 months. To do anything better, you need consistency, right? Where you need someone, whether it's paid or free, whether it's a mentor or a coach, whether it's your dad, your friend, it doesn't really matter. But you need someone who will give you that consistency of time and experience, and who will be able to draw upon their diverse experiences and talk about, hey, there's an organization that does this, there's an organization that does that. Which kind of an organization do you want to be? What's closer to your value system, etc. And I feel that, when you're starting out, uh, we all talk about culture, but I don't know how many of us actually think about culture as much as we think about, let's say, the business or the sales, etc. And it's fair, right? It's the business that's going to keep the business alive. But I also feel getting parts of the culture right is really, really important. And to some extent, I feel that we were fortunate because we were, I would say, older founders. We were all 35 ish when we started out. And that was really helpful because we'd been in organizations that that had taught us a few things, right? And so, to give you an example, right, I think a big part of why we have a really like strong trust-based culture at 1MG is that for the longest time, everything happened in the open, right? Like even
Mm,
today, we don't have cabins, we don't have rooms. Uh, all of us sit on the same floor next to each other.
right.
We've tapered it down, but strategy discussions, reviews, everything happened on the floor. And if I was unhappy about something, that happened on the floor. If I was happy about something, that happened on the floor too. If I felt something was not in line with our cultural values, it happened on the floor. You know, and it could go both ways, but I would like to look at it from a positive lens, that the direction it went in was that it established for everyone that that there are no secrets, right? That
Yeah,
conversations
yeah,
can happen, and people would be taken aback because they would come back with these principles. Oh, praise happens in public and XYZ happens in private. And I was like, what if you got past this hang up and you said that, hey, I'm not praising you or anything. I'm just stating facts. And what if that let you move past and get better at things, right? And so
yeah.
a lot of it is just about the value system you want to emulate. And I do feel really strongly that someone who can sort of take a dispassionate look at what you're doing and how you're doing things, and can actually give you a toolkit to sort of think about
Yeah.
these things, could be really, really helpful.
Yeah, and absolutely, Gaurav. And yeah, I could sense the authenticity when you spoke about that with your own experience. And seems like Zynga was a beautiful experience from you, since you experienced
That's
coaching
it.
also there for the
Yeah.
first time. Um, and 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 you're right. And I think just going back to what you said about you know uh, a startup leadership team needing to engage with a group coach to help them navigate through their realities and so on and so forth, give a dispassionate view, provide a toolkit. What we've also found is and that's been interesting, that yes, while the toolkit is important, but also being able to help them see the mirror, because sometimes we found that senior leadership teams can be quite lost in the hustle of things and can end up believing that and I don't mean any disrespect, but can sometimes end up believing that they've arrived, or they're doing so much work and everything is great. But only when you show them the mirror, and sometimes you need an external coach to show them the mirror. I'll give you an example, because in the work that we do with Synergizing Strengths, we run a team assessment report through the table group, right? 5 dysfunctions of a team. And it talks about trust and conflict and commitment and finally attention to results. So I was
Yeah.
working with this leadership team of a startup, and they were achieving results like crazy, Gaurav, quarter on quarter. Yeah, they were doing 220%, 165% of their goals, right? Quarter on quarter. So, you would call them a high performing team, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yet, when they did the survey that we got done through a third party from, Patrick Lencioni's company, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, the top of the pyramid, attention to results, came as red. So imagine this: on their Excel sheet, results are green.
Yeah.
And in the assessment report, their attention to results was red. And the founder of that company looked at me, and we were doing the group coaching session, and he said, Gatik, this is wrong. We are green in results. Why is this showing red in results? And I had to correct him. I said, you're not red in results. You're green in results. You're red in attention to results.
Yeah.
He said, what does that mean? I said, what that likely means is that you're getting results not because this is a high performing team. You're getting results because your product is great for the market, you've got great timing, the
Yeah.
market is ripe, yada, yada, or your goals are too low, but you're definitely not getting it because the team is focused on results. And as we
Yeah.
drilled
Yeah.
down, it became so real for him. I was like, so what you're saying is this 210 we're doing, we can actually be doing 400% of it if we actually
Yeah.
reset a few things. And I think that was a big revelation. So I think you're absolutely right. Being able to provide that outside in view becomes absolutely important. Let's take a few questions, Gaurav, as we are nearing the end of our time. And I've enjoyed this chat with you so far, Gaurav. Thanks so much for sharing your nuggets. But let's take a few questions from here. I have, so I'm going to pick up one question from Vivek here and pop it up on the screen. You can see that as well. Gaurav, interesting question, right? About your value of be your own CEO. How does it work in a startup context versus a more stable or a scaled up organization? And you may have seen it in both ends, right? So, what's your view there?
Yeah, look, that's a tough question. Something that we are struggling with. We keep struggling with as well, right? But I don't think the key premise changes of being a CEO, right? It's just that the the influence area, the influence, let's say, bubble that you have just reduces. So I'll give you an example. Um, when 1MG was a startup and small, an engineer could probably be a CEO and fundamentally rewrite our stack, which actually one of our engineer did, right? It had its own ramifications, and we've often talked about it as a case study, right? Because some engineers after that said, "Hey, this is a great example of why someone should not be allowed to be a CEO because they did something and we suffered." And I said, "This is exactly the reason why we should do it because we did something, we learned, we came together as a team, and I would not change it for anything, right?" So back when 1MG was small, they could have an impact which was outsized. Today, when 1MG is small, maybe an individual engineer can still say um, that this part of, let's say, technology is poor. I'm going to change it. Uh, what being a CEO means is for them to learn how do they convince, let's say, their manager that this is something that's
Hmm.
important. How do they
Hmm.
convince their team that we are going to come together and do it? Because what is a CEO doing, right? A CEO is saying, this is important. I'm going to bring everyone together, make sure they are aligned behind my vision. Oftentimes, we think that the CEO is this sort of lone, badass wolf. He's just going and conquering stuff. No, a
Right.
CEO is essentially a guy, right? A CEO is essentially a person who has a vision, which is maybe ahead of its time, right? Who convinces a large or who convinces an organization, a team of individuals that this is worth going after, right? And then he essentially takes them on this journey, right? And so no matter what size of your organization is, it is incredibly important to actually identify such people because they are eventually going to be the ones who scale, right? It's true for business, it's true for technology, it's true for operations. We have
100%.
supply chain teams who say that, let's say we can improve how we treat blue collar workers, right? And there's a
Hmm.
CEO, there's an individual who says this is important. I'm going to come back with a plan. And when uh, I'll give you another example. We were saying that rewards and recognitions is not something we do really well at 1MG. It's a known problem. We've talked about it, right? But instead of me solving it, I find someone who says, "Hey, I'm passionate about it," and then I say, "Okay, why don't you go drive it?"
Right.
We've had people who said, "Hey, 1MG does not write enough, let's say, articles, etc." So typically I said, "Okay, if you care about it, why don't you come back and present a plan?" Right? And then the organization's goal becomes, how do you encourage, empower, and enable these individuals to actually drive these things forward and essentially
Right.
create a new set of leaders?
Yeah, and I think that's so powerful. And what you're talking about as be your own CEO, we've kind of learned to call it the founder's mentality, right? And you're so right. How do you help people understand the founder's mentality is a large part of the work that we do, because one of the biggest struggles got of many founders is that I don't see that same fire in my team, and it's sometimes also important to define what is that mindset that you're looking for. And
What is
many
that
founders,
mindset?
many leadership teams struggle to define. They say, I want you to be like a CEO, I want you to be like a founder, but what does that really mean, right? And for us, it's
Yes.
what's really helped is using a bit of a framework and really understanding from the organization. Is it bias for action that you're talking about? Is it frontline obsession that you're talking about? Is it cash flow focus that you're talking about? Which aspects of founder mentality are critical for you? And then helping people understand those elements becomes really important. But completely connect with what you said. You wanted to add
You
something
know,
there, Gaurav. I can sense
yeah,
that.
I just wanted to add here. A lot of times what I've realized, especially in my experience as well, is that when I've said I need to have customer obsession, right? Um, when teams, let's say, don't demonstrate enough customer obsession, I've also realized that while I talk about customer obsession, it doesn't show in my actions for the team where I prioritize customer obsession for them enough. Right. And so
Mm,
oftentimes I feel that we as founders want founder mentality, but we are unable to define, like you said, what that
that's it.
means. And we are unwilling to give the latitude that we have as like today. I have the latitude to do pretty much what I want at 1MG, right? If I want to hire, if I want to, let's say, um, if I want to, let's say, invest in something, etc., right? You cannot say, I want this founder mentality without then offering the same latitude to other individuals, right? Which we are often unwilling to provide. So I really
Sure.
like how you put it, that it's really important to actually identify and define what you're looking for individuals from individuals as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And maybe the last question that we'll take, Gaurav, is from Avinash, asking you, Gaurav, what is your measurement of a high performance team? How would you
Uh,
measure a high performance team, Gaurav?
I was looking at the comment section and I was secretly hoping that we will not pick this question. But, but as life would have it, this question, it's a tough question to answer, and I'm not sure. Like, I will try to, for sure, give an off the cuff response, um,
Right.
but I'm not sure if I can. And there's so many different elements of a high performance team, right? I would say that things that I've seen in high performance teams are incredible amounts of initiative and ownership,
Mm,
really high degrees of trust. And when I say trust, trust is actually trust is a complex term, right? So you have to break it. But I've seen that teams that are extremely candid, right, where they can fight and they can get back together and have a beer, where they can arrive at conclusions no matter how tough those decisions are, where teams watch each other's back, right? That I will not let you fail. And if you've committed to something, even though I disagree, but I will go to the end of the line and make sure you do not fail, right? So that trust becomes really important in teams. I think the third thing is teams that of course demonstrate initiative, ownership, trust, but then also push you to achieve your best, right?
right.
and i've right, and I've seen teams where a lot of initiative, ownership, a lot of trust, but they don't push you every day, where you feel that when I come become a part of this, when I come back to this team, I always feel, oh my god, I have so much more to achieve, right? And I go back super energized. So I would say those are the three, four things, two, three things that I've seen in like really high performance teams. We have teams at 1MG that demonstrate this like every day. When you go to their meetings, like I come back and I sit in those meetings and I tell them, oh my God, I'm wowed with what you guys have taught me today, right? And there are other things where I'm like, okay, you should go learn from this team. And what we do is we basically then we say, okay, this team is in our view like a really high performance team, and everyone else basically gets to intern with them for a month, right? So they can see
Oh, wow.
some of that.
Love that idea.
Yeah. So we're just trying a bunch of these things, right? And what we've seen is that these two or three values really hold out. That these high performance teams, when they come in a review, before me pointing out, they will figure out, oh, the quality of this was not as high as we really set a bar for. Apologies, we will come back on it next time, right? And this is really what you want to see. So setting a really high bar, very high degrees of trust, and then really high initiative and ownership is what I would probably pick.
And while you said off the cuff, Gaurav, I think you've just said it so beautifully because if you don't mind, I'll also take a stab at this question because it's close
Please,
to my
please,
heart.
absolutely.
And I think what you said really resonates with me. But we're often asked this question when we do this work with senior leaders around what is the measure of success of this team becoming a high performance team. Obviously, clients ask us this question in a slightly different way, where they say, what's the ROI? How do you measure the success of this team becoming a high performing team? And we have learned over these last 11 years doing this with 200 organizations and partnering with the Table Group's survey on the 5 dysfunctions of a team. We've learned that there are 5 very specific measures, Gaurav, that you also spoke about that help you define whether it's a high performing team, right? Number one, trust. Number two, the level of conflict, healthy conflict. Number three, the level of commitment. Number four, accountability, which is
Yeah.
what you spoke about, holding each other accountable. And number five, focus on results, right? So
Yeah.
if when clients ask us what is the measure of a high performing team and what's the ROI on this, we say, all right, these are the five measures. What's your team's level of trust? What's Are they living in artificial harmony or do they have healthy conflict? What is their level of commitment? Do they say yes but mean no? What is their level of accountability? Do they hold each other accountable? And number five, are they focused on results or they're just getting results because of the market conditions? And we try and couple this with an assessment which shows them a score before, and then you do it after 6 months, and you actually can see the tangible change, and that's where the magic happens. So I love how you described it, Gaurav, because you spoke to these 5 points as well, and really
Right.
resonate with your thoughts. Well,
Right.
we're kind of 2 minutes ahead of time. I think I got carried away in this conversation with you, Gaurav, but this has been fabulous. This has been so enriching for me. I think I love that idea, the last idea that you spoke about teams interning with other teams. And maybe if we talk later, I'd love to pick your brains more about that. Love to learn more about how that may be working out. But Gaurav, thank you so much for making time. I know you're a very busy person. You've got a thousand other things to do, but you prioritize this Leaders Cafe with Transform Me. Really appreciate that. And thank you so much for sharing your insights with the community. And I'm hopeful the intent of the Leaders Cafe is to create conversations that matter by people who matter. And I'm hoping that um, your inputs are going to help many of our community members here. So thanks once again, Gaurav, and I look forward to staying connected.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure. Thank you so much for organizing this.
Thanks, Gaurav. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. We'll meet again at the Leaders Cafe in a month's time. Enjoy your time. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, whichever part of the world you're logging in from. Till next time.